Recently, all over the Japanese news was a story of an older gentleman who had become intoxicated, down in the subway, fell onto the tracks, and no one was coming to his aid, except for a young 20-something-year-old, a university student, who decided to jump down onto the tracks and try to lift this man up, when tragically, the subway train came into the station and killed them both. What really moved the Japanese people was when they found out that this young student had come to study in Japan from Korea. Now, if you know anything about history, you will realize there is a tremendous animosity between Korea and Japan, particularly because of the invasion and what was done to Korea during World War II. So that this man would give his life, this young university student from Korea would give his life for a Japanese man who had been intoxicated, was beyond their imagination. Perhaps many people don't realize that the Christian faith, most recently, has taken strongest root in all of Asia, in Korea. Very strong Christian nation of recent years, second in Asia only to the Philippines in populations of believers. So the scriptures tell us in Matthew chapter 21, Jesus says, "The stone which the builders have rejected has become the cornerstone. This was the Lord's doing, and it is marvelous in our eyes. Therefore I tell you, the kingdom of God will be taken away from you and given to a nation producing good fruits." The fruit of Christianity is a living witness to the sacrifice of Jesus Christ on the cross, the sacrifice for the sake of love of neighbor. And this weekend, as we celebrate Respect Life Sunday in Respect Life Month, we might wonder, how on earth are we bearing good fruit in the vineyard of the Lord, of which Isaiah speaks in the first reading as well? How are we bearing good fruit for God? Do we have people who are willing to sacrifice themselves, like this young Korean, for someone he did not even know? There was an interesting article a few years ago by a very popular singer who said this during one of his performances. He wanted to tell the audience a story about a pregnant woman who was admitted to the hospital with appendicitis. And he says, quote, "The doctors had to apply some ice on her stomach, and when the treatments ended, the doctors suggested that she abort her child. They told her it was the best solution because the baby would be born with some disability. But the young, brave wife decided not to abort, and the child was born. That woman was my mother, and I was the child. Maybe I'm partisan, but I can say that it was the right choice. And I hope that this could encourage many mothers who sometimes might find themselves in difficult situations but want to save the life of their baby." This singer was born the year after I was born, and I think many of you know him. In fact, Luciano Pavarotti, that great opera singer, said he was the greatest voice he had ever heard on earth. His name is Andrea Bocelli, that magnificent blind tenor from Italy, who has the voice of an angel, as clear as a bell. Yes, we need to encourage fortitude. He speaks of his mother as a strong young mother. Fortitude is one of the virtues we need, spiritual courage to do the right thing in every circumstance. St. Paul speaks to us today in the second reading from his letter to the Philippians in chapter 4, that what we need to bring into our homes, into our families, are these kinds of values. He says, think about these things. Whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is gracious, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. And then he concludes, the God of peace will be with you. I suggest to you, St. Paul is exactly right. That if in our homes we start to form our children in the virtues, we will begin to see a change in the culture. Just after the last Mass, I had a little 4-year-old boy who had wanted to ask a question. His father said, Father, he's really wanting to ask this question. He said, please ask me your question. And the little boy, the 4-year-old, said, why does God allow sickness in the world? And the father smiled and said, he asked me that last night. Maybe you can help me answer it. And I said, you know, son, God permits these things so that we will come together and help one another. Because Jesus wants us to help one another, whether it's sickness of a physical nature, whether it's a moral sickness, whether it's a spiritual sickness, right? Jesus wants us to come together and work together because he planted the vineyard. We are his vine, and we are to produce good grapes, or else the vine will wither and there will be bad or no grapes at all. We know the problems in the culture. We see the moral ills of abortion and infanticide and euthanasia, all the various ills that we could go on and on, a plethora of them, starting with the anti-life attitude, with the contraceptive mentality, and going all the way to the end where we throw away our elders. So how do we counteract it? What I suggest to you is what our Holy Father is working on beginning today. He's gathered a great synod of bishops to reflect on the family. The synod on the family. It's all starting there, isn't it? If we can form our little ones in the virtues, then they will be the ones to change the culture. We can't legislate change in people's hearts, but legislation might take effect later once we change hearts from within. And that is when you begin to develop the virtues. There are 4 cardinal virtues that go hand in hand with the theological virtues. What are the theological virtues? Faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these, St. Paul tells us, is love. Why? Because God is love. But beyond faith, hope, and love, there are moral, practical virtues known as the cardinal virtues, hinge virtues in the formation of your family. What are they? They are prudence, temperance, justice, and fortitude. Let's look first at justice. Justice is the moral virtue of rendering unto another what is their due. So when you go to the store and you purchase something, you have to pay the price. If your child tries to slip in a candy bar in the pocket, it's your moral duty to pull it out and say, no, son, we have to pay for this. You teach them the virtue of justice from a young age. If you find out after you've walked out of the store, what do? You bring the child back into the store, return it to the counter, teach them the lesson. We have to teach lessons from an early age. If we neglect it, we will pay for it in the long run. Justice. Another element of justice, for example, is what you're doing today. It is not charity that you come to Mass. It is justice. Why? Justice is rendering unto another what is due. What is due to God? Worship, honor, praise, adoration. So we gather on the Lord's Day to worship God. That is an act of justice. The virtue of religion falls under the category of justice, rendering unto another what is due. When you are in your workplace, and you could cut this and cut that, and get away with making a little more profit, that is an injustice. So your example will have an effect on your family. because children see right through adults. You can teach them the lesson verbally and not give them the lesson actually, practically, and then you see what happens. The action speaks louder than the word, and they will imitate the action. We have to be examples of true justice. What about temperance? Do kids love lollipops? Of course they do. And there's nothing wrong with 1 or 2 lollipops. But if you leave out a bucket of lollipops and you go out to do your shopping and you get back home, what might have happened to that bucket? It may be empty. Why? Because we have a weakness when it comes to self-control. Self-control, comes through the virtue of temperance. You teach the lesson with regard to sensual pleasures, whether it's taste, touch, etc. We have to teach that lesson when very, very young, so that as we get older and many more temptations come our way, we will have learned the virtue of self-control. That's temperance, so that you don't end up like that old Japanese man, so intoxicated that you fall down and get killed on the subway tracks, and another person give a life trying to save you. Temperance, it's moderation. Say all kinds of virtue with moderation. Think about, for example, St. Paul says, think of what is pure. How do we moderate in an impure society? Through the virtue, again under that category, which is called modesty. Modesty. Because we don't realize how we're affecting other people. I really think that. People must not realize by their immodesty, their impurity, how they're affecting other people's lives and souls. So we need modesty. It's moderation. It's temperance. Virtue, St. Thomas Aquinas says, is always in the middle. Not one extreme or the other. Virtue is in the middle. So we need temperance to help us with the sensual pleasures. So justice, temperance. What about fortitude? Fortitude is the spiritual courage to stand up when everybody else says you're wrong. To stand up when everybody else is doing the wrong thing and trying to get you to do it. When everybody else might laugh at you and mock you as they mocked our Lord. When you stand up for life and the dignity of the human person, when you stand up for truth, because we live in a culture now where lying is part and parcel of daily living. It's hard to know if there's anybody telling you the truth anymore. People started when they were little to cut a little bit off the truth here and cut a little bit off the truth there, and when they see that example, then they become tragically almost pathological in lying. And we cannot find the truth until we return to the one who said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And so we need courage, spiritual courage, to stand up for what is right and to do what is good. And finally, the virtue of prudence. What is prudence? Prudence is right reason in action. God gave us, the human race, and only to the human race, the gift of reason. And we are to use right reason. That means it should be informed with what is true. Therefore, it would be right reasoning, and then act upon it. Action. Prudent action. In every circumstance, pray that you can develop prudence in your child. Right? When you're, for example, teaching your child to ride the bike, you have to use prudence in terms of where the child can ride the bike. You have to look at what's going on in the street, right? Or when the child is first learning to walk, right? You have to put up certain boundaries so the child doesn't walk into the street. It takes prudence, right judgment. Ask God for that grace. When we start to form our families anew in the virtues, prudence, temperance, justice, fortitude, and the theological virtues of faith, hope, and love, then we will begin to see that the culture can change. Great organizations like Birthright and Project Defending Life, Right to Life, all of these organizations, they cannot do it alone. They need you and your family to build up a different kind of culture. And then when others see the joy of Christian living, they will answer, why are those people joyful? What's their blessing? And they will return to the God who is the author of life, the giver of truth, who wants to reveal to them divine love. And so today, I ask you to join me in a spirit of prayer with a prayer from our Holy Father, Pope Francis, to begin this synod on the family. O Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, in you we contemplate the splendor of true love. To you we turn with trust. O Holy Family of Nazareth, grant that our families too may be places of communion and prayer, authentic schools of the gospel, and small domestic churches. O Holy Family of Nazareth, may families never again experience violence, rejection, or division. May all who have been hurt or scandalized find ready comfort and healing. O Holy Family of Nazareth, may the approaching Synod of Bishops make us once more mindful of the sacredness and inviolability of the family and its beauty in God's plan. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, graciously hear our prayer, both now and forever. Amen.